Welcome to the Founders Forum podcast, brought to you by the Foxwell Founders, where we interview some of the hottest minds in D2C right now and deep dive on their area of expertise. Everyone that we interview here is a cherished member of our Foxwell Founders community of over 550 advertisers worldwide and are at the cutting edge of what is working right now. I hope you enjoy this, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Andrew at Foxwell Digital. And now let's get stuck into this week's episode. Here are Edwin and Tris, our hosts.
Three best ways that we've ever seen to deal with this is
it's one of the things that's working really, really well for our agency right now.
Question of the week, right?
He's going to spill all the tea on TikTok for us. What is the oh wow strategy of the moment? If it's working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Who buys it even at that time, right? Hey guys, welcome to the Foxwell Founders Forum with me, Tris, Edwin and Josh here from the Aligned Growth. These guys really know what it's talking about when it comes to scaling social media influencers for your D2C brands. So much so, every time they start with a new brand, there's so much that happens with it with new influencers. There's so much to sign and learn. But what they do say is, on average, they sign about 100 new influencers for your brand in the first 90 days of working with you on average, which blows me away. So if it's something you need to know about influencer marketing and Josh doesn't know it, it's not worth knowing. All right. So Edwin, hit us up with the first question.
So micro influencers, 190 days, you've done a lot. Tell me what is your process for finding these micro influencers?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. But yeah, in terms of finding influencers, the first thing that we do is we really build out the foundation of your program. So we'd like to have a solid tech stack to where we have a centralized application software that we can manage all those influencer partnerships in one place. So instead of like sending one-off DMs and getting lost in those inboxes and getting super hairy, basically what my team does is we build that out. Like we use a tool called Aspire for all of our influencer tools or our clients. And then basically my team will go source about 200 influencers a week on behalf of the client. And so typically, like out of that 200, we'll source them on a SaaS tool. So another great tool that you're probably familiar with if you're in the Foxwell community is Story Clash. And it's really the best sourcing tool that we've found to date. And basically, like my team will be going through Story Clash, and based off the criteria that we set with the brand of like who's a good fit for the brand, who's a great fit for this campaign, we will go source about 200 every single week. And so the size followings for that range between 10,000 followers up to 100,000 followers in terms of just like product gifting. So that would like what we would consider a micro creator. Okay. And so out of that 200, we typically get opt-in rates that vary per brand from anywhere from 10% opt-in rates. So we reach out to 200, 20 opt-in up to 40% opt-in rates. Whoa. Just depending on the product value and how well known the brand is. So that's a little bit about kind of our process for sourcing.
And the Spire software, is that your CRM? Is that a CRM that like sequences the DMs, or what is tell me more about that, because I've never used Aspire.
Yeah, so Aspire is it's like an all-in influencer tool. They also have sourcing capabilities, but really it's like what we use it for is like a centralized application. That way we can filter through applicants based off their socials, based off their content that they're making. And then it also processes orders through Shopify once we accept them in there. So you can import all your Shopify products into Aspire. The creator can then select what product they want. And then you can also manage, anything from whitelisting to payments, to affiliate links, to discount codes, to track sales. So it's kind of like an all-in-one solution.
Nice. Wow. Nice. So you're talking about track sales there. It brings us beautifully onto the point, I suppose. 100 in the first 90 days. That's a lot of people talking about your brand. A lot of people getting it out there. How do you track the efficiency? I mean, there's got to be very difficult to track, like how you're making your money back from all those people.
Yeah, for sure. So I think in terms of efficiency, like how we like to think about it is, for number one is like, I'm a former paid social guy turned into a brand marketer. is kind of how I like to
400+.
say it. I was in-house. I ran my own brand for 5 years as a weighted blanket company. And then I was
Nice.
in-house at a brand called Groove Life. And, I was managing about 7 figures a month in paid social. And
Wow.
so, diving into influencer has been kind of like what I've been really diving into the last like 3 to 4 years. And so in terms of like efficiency, how we think about influencer is a great channel to generate cheap attention and cheap content. So really it's attention and a content channel that helps feed the rest of the channel. So like I'm not here to tell you that influencer is going to be your biggest revenue driver in 2024. I think that we're just very realistic that paid social is going to be the bread and butter for any brand. And so if you don't have paid social and search and shopping and email figured out, then you probably don't need to come to us to figure out influencer. But once you do figure those out, then all of a sudden we get you 5 to 10 new pieces of content a week that you can use in paid social. You can use that across organic social. And then we have, maybe a reel pops off on Instagram or a post pops off on TikTok, and you get all this new organic reach that fills up the top of funnel that then comes into your retargeting buckets, comes into your email list, and just helps efficiency from there. So this is much more of an attention and content generating channel than a direct response on spending $1 and getting $5 back. So that's kind of how we think about it.
And so what are the KPIs that you're reporting back to the customer? Is it likes, comments? Is it impressions? Like, is it that sort of metric, or what KPIs are you reporting back to your clients?
Yeah. So on a weekly basis, we're reporting back, here's how many creators we reached out to. Here's how many applied. Here's how much product was sent. And here's all the posts that were posted organically across Instagram and TikTok primarily. And then we upload all that content into Google Drive folder of like, hey, here's all the content that you have creative rights to that you can deploy now across assets. And then from a monthly and a quarterly perspective, we're reporting on the total organic reach. We're also calculating CPMs. And so we'll take, if we're just doing product gifting, we'll actually take, a function of your cost of goods sold and blend that into a CPM metric. Okay. And so, your Facebook ads, depending on the brand, might be anywhere from $20 CPM up to $60 CPM.
Yeah.
So if we can get $20 CPMs or below, we just really consider that a win of like, hey, we got really cheap eyeballs here for really just the cost of product. And really, there's, at the end of the day, there's going to be ad blindness regardless, like especially on TikTok. If you're scrolling TikTok and you see an ad, you kind of know it immediately, right? Yeah. And you keep going past it. But if an influencer is actually coming and one of your favorite creators is like posting about a product and it's more entertaining and engaging than a typical ad, then they just entered a consideration phase. And we did that for really cheap attention. And so those are kind of the things that we report on is really the organic reach, the CPMs is kind of like the leading metric for top of funnel. And then of course, all the content that you get from that you can leverage across all your channels.
Nice. So realistically, people need to be considering when they're starting with influencer marketing, they need to think a little bit more about, product gifts, but also then the cost of investing in this. Do you come to, like, say, for example, someone's coming to you and they're not quite ready. What does that somebody look like? What threshold do they need to hit themselves? You're saying they need to have paid social figured out. They need to kind of get ready. Like what threshold do they need to hit to come and say, work with an agency on influencer marketing? Is there a small amount?
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of have 2 different buckets of clients. The first bucket of the earliest brands that we're willing to take on are doing between $1 million a year and $5 million a year. And so if you fall into that bucket and you have paid social going, you're generating consistent revenue and, you have your email flows set up, search shopping, like I said earlier, and like all of that is figured out, then what we can do is we've been training teams in-house. So we'll take your social media manager, for example, and we'll basically bolt on our influencer playbook inside of their business. So instead of my team managing it, we'll actually just work on training that person in-house so that they have all the tools and resources that they need to actually execute the same playbook that we do for our more established brands. And so that's that's kind of the range of our first bucket. The second bucket is you need to be doing about $6 million a year to work with us on a done for you engagement, where my team does basically everything from outreach, negotiation with large creators, to sponsoring YouTube channels, to just like larger engagements with where there's maybe product gifting first, which we like to use as the base of every program. But really what we want to do is eventually have a paid budget where we're sponsoring creators, because we want a roadmap for those influencers to get sponsored. So those clients are typically in the 8 figures a lot of times, but we start it at 6 million a year.
So you mentioned there something just specifically about how you're giving gifts, but for the people that you're in the done for you, you also have this idea of you're sponsoring them as well. So is it like you're sponsoring them, and which audiences are you going after? Are you going broad with influencers, or because we've seen in our side that when we get influencers in, they give us their audiences, they allow us to promote them to their own audiences, but they also allow us to promote them within the page that we have. How do you manage that relationship between where you're sponsoring it, where the ad budget goes, all that stuff?
Yeah. So number one is we want to use influencer as part of the brand's content calendar. So a lot of people treat influencer like it's this thing on this island on its own, and it's treated as its own channel. But really what we want to do is we want to include those creators into larger moments throughout the year. So let's say like one of our clients, Pop Sockets, they're in Target. And so a lot of times we will actually be sponsoring creators to go into Target to just drive demand from social into like retail locations. And you'd be surprised, like I've talked to a lot of brands who are in Walmart, and like the buyers of Walmart want to see brands that are actually investing into influencer, because they're seeing how well Kim K is doing, they're seeing how well Mr. Beast is doing, so they want the brands to be invested into influencer marketing. And so basically, like in terms of that, we'll basically just negotiate on a CPM basis where we average their last 10 videos, put that into a CPM that we're willing to pay, and then we'll negotiate from there in terms of deliverables. But I don't know, does that answer your question?
Kind of. So you touched on something there specifically around what you're getting them to do, which we can come to in a minute. But what I'm asking is, when you're paying somebody, you pay them on a CPM basis. Do you run any ads behind those, or do the brands run that themselves?
Yeah. So typically the brand, we don't run any paid social. So we work with a lot of paid social teams who we'll whitelist. We'll either get content for them that they can leverage into paid social. We might actually set up a whitelisting agreement where they're running ads through that influencer's page. Maybe they're retargeting that audience on Instagram or on TikTok. But yes, those are all things that we help assist other paid social teams. So we're not competitive with those paid social teams, but really trying to help those paid social teams just get more efficient with their ad spend, and really to be an asset to them as well.
Gotcha.
And so when they're going out, they're sourcing the micro influencers to begin with. What are the criteria that they're going after, right? Because like sometimes you have influencers that they have larger follower accounts, but maybe the engagement isn't so much there. And so what are the benchmarks that you're looking for?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. I would say that following count really doesn't matter in terms of like the actual deliverable. Like in terms of
hold on. Can we repeat that? Because that is, I cannot tell you how many clients I wish knew this.
I'll say it again. So the follower count doesn't matter when it comes to the deliverables. Okay. So we care more about the content that's getting posted and the reach that the content is getting.
Okay.
Whereas, because if you look at, there's a lot of TikTok creators that might have 1 million followers on TikTok.
Yeah.
And we've seen it where posts are only getting 5,000 views per video.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really, they might have had one video mainly because one video popped off, got a ton of followers, and maybe it wasn't relevant to the rest of their content. So they have this large following, but they don't have a ton of reach on their like everyday content. And so we're looking at that everyday reach and using that as our benchmark for rates, not following.
So what's the benchmark reach that you want? And like, because I guess it's a correlation between the cost of goods sold, right? And then also the reach. And so tell me, like, what's the calculation there?
Yeah. So it's all CPM based. So like if we have, and just to say, like with the larger creators, we are using it for we are using like a paid budget. This isn't
Yeah.
so outside of cost of goods sold, like we might be gifting and calculating CPM for product gifting, but for a sponsored post, we're actually getting like a paid budget. So at a minimum, a brand might give us $5,000 to $10,000 on like as a first when they're first starting out with sponsoring influencers. And so we'll take that $5,000 to $10,000, and let's say we spread $5,000 across 5 creators, and so $1,000 per post for 5 creators. And so we'll look at basically go after creators between 100,000 and 500,000 followers, just as our first kind of initial look, and then we dive deeper into their content, and we basically try to calculate like how many impressions would we get for $20 CPMs, $4,000. And so we'll look at that and basically make a first offer that's lower than what we want, and then they come back, they negotiate back and forth until we find a reasonable rate that we know is going to get like good attention and cheap eyeballs. And one of the things that you can do in those contracts is actually have a minimum view threshold in that contract, to where if one post doesn't generate like the views that you want it to, basically they can make another post to generate enough views that would meet that threshold for the contract. So that's just a quick little tip.
Makes sense. So what I'm hearing from you though is that you're not going after one person with what, like you're not spreading too thin and going one post from 20 people. It's 4 people with 5 posts, or 5 people with 4 posts. So you have kind of repeated content.
Yeah, especially when when we want more control over the content, that's when you have a more of a paid budget to execute that. So if there's a new product launch coming up, if you're launching into Sprouts or Target or Walmart, and you want, them to actually physically go into a location, then you probably need a paid budget versus sending a free product and kind of giving them light guidelines, right? And so I think that's an important note, is if you want more control over that content, having a paid budget with these larger creators is really going to help that content quality go up. But at the end of the day, we want to let the creator create and be creative, but we'll at least have a say about that content before it gets posted.
For the agency owners that are listening that want to sort of incorporate influencer, I always like to ask the money question, right? So let's say the brand gives you $10,000 to activate. Where are you making the money? Is it from that 10,000, and then it's the difference between what you pay out the influencer and then what you take home, or is it just purely the retainer? Where because we put in the work, we got to make the money.
Yeah.
And so where are you making the money, or where are the gotchas at the beginning when you were doing this, and now you're like
the gotchas? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how we like to think of ourselves is like, you think about influencer management.
Okay.
Like, large influencers have a management team, right, where they're taking a cut of the budget. But we're really influencer management for the D2C brand. So the brand is our client, not the influencer. And so how we treat it is just as a fixed retainer, where we're their management team. It's just upfront. We have a 3-month minimum contract on a retainer basis, and then it's typically month to month after that. And so we don't take a percentage of the rate, but our rate does go up when we move from, just strictly product gifting to larger campaigns, where we might be spending, like we are about to be working with a large brand that's at retail that they want to spend $500,000 this year just on influencer. And so we don't take a percentage of that. We just have a set fixed rate. It doesn't even depend on the brand size. It's just what our rate is. And so, yeah, that's how we make money.
Nice. Fair. You talked there about, because I got everything there, but you talked there about how like a brand wants to spend $500,000 on influencers. Like, how does a brand, first of all, get to that number and kind of say, oh, I'm going to spend $500,000 versus $250,000, versus then, from that, do they come to you with a KPI and say, we just want X many influencers? Or what is the KPIs from a brand's point of view, or what should they be versus what they currently are when they say, I want to spend $500,000?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it definitely depends on the brand. And the brand I just mentioned is a extremely large company that's like well into the 9 figures, if not $1 billion brand. And so that is a very rare case where a brand's like, we want to spend this much money on influencers. Like actually another creative agency brought us in to that contract, and they had kind of set some thoughts of like, hey, we want to sign 2 mega influencers, 6 mid-tier creators, and then sign some micro influencers. And we were like, you could be way more efficient with that ad spend, right? And so we kind of chalked it up where we how to be more efficient. So number one is like one of the things that we really love to do is just like increasing the volume of partnerships and the volume of content that's getting posted by creators to just give your chance like a higher chance of basically getting a ton of organic reach and going viral on Instagram and TikTok. So we're playing the lottery of what content's going to perform well on Instagram and TikTok. And so we want to sign a bunch of creators between the 10,000 and 100,000 kind of following range. And so basically that's kind of the base. So for them, we basically said, hey, you said you could sign maybe, 50 influencers. We feel like for this budget, we could actually sign up to 200 creators over this time frame. And we might be able to do it on product gifting, but we also could do it on a pay-per-post engagement based off the product. And then for the mid-tier, one of the things that was important to them is that they didn't want to just do one-off partnerships. And so one of the things that we did was we broke up half of the budget for 3-month engagements, where that creator is posting every month, like 1 to 2 deliverables a month for 3 months. And it brings down the total rate because it's a longer term engagement. And so a lot of creators want consistent income versus one-off payments. And so that really incentivizes them to bring their total cost per post down so that it's fair for the brand. And then the other half of that budget for the mid-tier creators, we basically said, hey, we also want to make sure that we leave room for things like Q4, things for product launches at retail, things that are trending on social that we could also take that budget for and make sure that we take advantage of, so that we don't want to just, if we're deploying a budget for the year, we don't want to just spend it all at one time. We want to be able to like use that for creative purposes throughout the year. And then the mega creators, we basically said we could sign up to 6 creators for that same budget and actually put them on 6-month commitments for those creators. So anyways, it's all dependent on the brand. There's like some of these things that we've talked about, which is like CPM, which is like cheap attention, having a ton of volume of creators, making sure that the content is a part of the total marketing strategy, not living on an island. Like these are some of the principles that we use as an agency, but it's all dependent on what the brand needs, and we can deploy that for the brand and kind of configure that within our framework.
And what are some of the common gotchas that you come across when you work with brands and this is their first sort of activation with you, right? They're not super experienced with it. What are things that are totally normal to you that when they see it, they sort of get creeped out or like their spidey senses go off?
Yeah. Their spidey senses go off. Trying to think. I mean, I think that the most challenging part of influencer is just like kind of what we've already talked about, which is like measuring the return, right?
Exactly.
Because I think that influencer in 2024 is not the same as influencer marketing was in 2015. And so like we've been working with a 9-figure brand recently who used to spend $500K a month on influencer marketing back in 2016. And they were getting a direct return just on discount codes and affiliate links where they'd spend $1 on influencer and make $5 to $6 back. And so, like
those were the days. They
weren't even running paid social. It was all primarily built on influencer. And so, but in 2024, people aren't like scrolling and then going to the link in bio. Like if I'm on the For You page on Instagram or on TikTok, I'm scrolling content, my brain is dead, and I'm not clicking the profile and remembering a discount code. What I will remember is an entertaining piece of content around a product, and I might search that on Instagram, go to the brand page, click that link in bio, or I might go to Google and then I might convert on a brand search. And I promise you, I never remember a discount code or use that creator's affiliate link.
Ever.
But brands, for some reason, expect that you're still going to do that to track revenue. And it doesn't happen as much as it used to, like in 2015. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think that's the hard expectation that brands need to understand, is that user behavior has changed. And so the discount code and affiliate link, that's not going to work. But what we can do is we can measure top of funnel, and then we can also look at post-purchase surveys. So we have brands where we have like the post-purchase survey attributes 7 figures in revenue annually just to influencer marketing, but you won't find that from a discount code or from an affiliate link. So I think that's just one other bottom of funnel measurement that you can use for revenue generation. But anyways, I think that's the challenge with this service and just as an agency.
Makes a ton of sense. I mean, look, one of the things that, as a boy, I always dreamed of being an influencer. Come up with this idea of posting about my day, and then,
I wanted to be an F1 driver.
I was going to say, real life took over then. But what is a micro influencer? How does one become a micro influencer? Like, is it? I've got 700 followers on TikTok, I think. So, am I a micro influencer, or do I need a few more for that?
No, I would say you're like a micro influencer. No, I'm just kidding. No, I would say no.
We have a brand that sells micro cookies, Tris, that I could send you now that you're a micro influencer.
Don't need any more cookies, bro.
All 700 followers. You gotta make sure that your post reaches all 700 of them.
Yeah,
you might have to boost it.
Yeah, sure. What kind of where are we talking about? Like when someone gets to like 1,000, 5,000, where are they getting to become a micro influencer?
Typically 10,000 followers is typically where we start. Yeah, 10,000 followers on TikTok or on Instagram.
You talked about reach and stuff as well in the middle of that. So it's not like just 10,000 and away you go. It's like how many people are actually reaching you. Do you do when you're onboarding an influencer then or micro influencer into your kind of your platform? Do you find then that people kind of have to give you a detail of like how many their last reach was, how it's going and all that kind of stuff? Or how do you engage with these people on an ongoing basis? Because you obviously don't just turn up one day and be like, X brand wants to do this. You have a relationship with them in the initial sense, right?
No, honestly, no.
Okay.
Like, no. So I think
he's the boss. He's just the boss. He shows up. He's like, bro, we doing it?
No, so I would say that we're starting the relationship off with offering free products for someone that has 10,000 followers, right? And so we want to make sure that their content is quality, but someone who has 10,000 followers, maybe they had a couple posts pop off and maybe they're getting a little bit of reach, but really like the value of that creator is that we're getting the content and that can be repurposed across other channels, right? And so we're at least getting content. It's coming through. Maybe they can be a part of an edit for the paid social team. Maybe they can be reposted on the brand's Instagram or TikTok. But no, we're not like, because we're doing such a high volume of influencers, we're not like every influencer we're sending an outreach email to, and they're getting an application link so they can apply into the program. And then from there, that's when we would start building a relationship, is if that content is doing really well. So we see we're sent free product, they've posted, and that content all of a sudden gets 500,000 views, or for some reason that content just looks really great from a paid social perspective, then maybe we put them on a 3-month contract for whitelisting. We might like have a more in-depth relationship there. But really for that, it's a high volume of partnerships. And so for us to be able to build a relationship with all 200 influencers that we're sourcing for each brand per week just isn't going to happen. And so it's really after they've provided deliverables and have posted that content.
Gotcha. So you're not really, I mean, when you're going through the people who you're offering it to, it's based on the way that they've entered themselves into the platform, rather than you going and saying, these 200 people are going to be very similar to this brand. You're kind of finding the type of influencers they flag themselves as.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's all based off their content, less about following. Following is just kind of like the first thing, and then just kind of observing their content from there, and then reaching out based off if they're a good fit for the brand.
Makes a
What's
ton of
the
sense.
biggest surprise that you've ever come across? Like you activated and you started the campaign and you're like, what the F is happening here? Like all your charts just started going like anti-gravity.
Oh man, that's a good question. Trying to
Story
think.
time.
Well, so one thing that was really interesting was sponsoring the Joe Rogan podcast in
Okay.
2020. So one of the things that we did was during 2020, Rogan was still on he was still on just like Apple Podcasts. He wasn't on Spotify yet. It was
Okay.
before his Spotify deal.
Okay.
And so a lot of people listen to podcasts while they drive.
Yeah.
Right. And so in 2020, people are in lockdowns or whatever. And so they're not driving. And so his listenership went way down during
Yeah.
2020. So the CPMs were cheap. Like basically it was cheaper to advertise on his podcast. And so one of the things that we did was we sponsored his podcast and then leveraged that content onto a paid social. And basically he had our product. He loved our product. He talked about the product on his podcast, but we didn't have like an actual video of him talking about it. And so we basically overlaid that soundbite onto a video of Joe Rogan wearing our product,
Okay.
and then put that into paid social, and like it took off at like a 6x ROAS like the first day, spending like, and it was, I think we were spending close to $5,000 to $10,000 a day at one point on
Decent.
that ad.
So now
yeah.
you are on the company Christmas card. You are forever on.
Yeah. No, and I'll say that wasn't all me. Like I was just a part of the team that did that. I didn't put that whole thing together. But it was a really fun campaign. The other one too that really opened my eyes to influencer marketing is I shared this case study on Twitter a couple of years ago. Was I had a client who did like basically cocktail mixes, and it was for a margarita.
Yeah.
And this influencer made this post about it on her stories, and like we saw a ton of revenue come in like that day, like 10,000. Like they're usually at 3K a day, and they sold like maybe 20K that day, like when she put that story up.
Whoa.
So then we took that, got the creative rights for that, plugged that in for before Cinco de Mayo.
No.
And we went from like 3K a day to like 9K to 10K a day, like in just like a day, and then ran out of inventory within like 2 weeks. Like literally having started from like $1 million run rate to, maybe doing 80K a month to selling maybe, I don't even remember. It was probably like 300K just that month on just because of that one post that we leveraged from an influencer posting. So I would say those are some fun rocket ship moments for sure.
Obviously you got to expect the unexpected from this, and there's like a little bit of make sure your inventory is in stock, because you got to be in the moment, right? So if you're running out of stock after things going viral, that's the worst case scenario. So do you warn people before you start? Is that something that they should have in stock and be really like high up on stock?
That is really funny. No, I should though. I should be like, get ready. We're gonna sell out all your inventory. That'd be a great way to kick it off. It actually is pretty interesting. Like before we started recording, I was mentioning that I have an 8-month-old daughter, and like one of the things that my wife has actually been following along with on Instagram is the formula that we use is a goat milk based formula. It's like basically the closest thing to breast milk.
Yeah.
And this product is now sold out of every Target and Walmart in America. Like they can't keep up with demand right now.
Yeah.
And my wife bought it from an influencer, because the influencer's like, my wife is super into holistic health and wellness. This is a health and wellness creator who talks about, the formula that she uses for her baby. And that's why my wife bought it. And so I don't know, it's just like really interesting to see those kind of macro trends. Like even with, you think about like the Stanley mugs and just like that whole case study of all the creators really pushing that and it going viral, and then, not being able to find the colorway that you want. So I don't know, there's something to that, but Yes, I should start warning them about their inventory before we start working together. But I want to make sure that we have proper expectations in place.
For sure.
All right, guys, we had an amazing episode. Josh told us everything we need to know about micro influencers, the gotchas, what you have to know. I'm Edwin.
I'm Tris.
I'm Josh.
See you next time.
See you next time, guys.